Yo, yo, yo! What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Trevor, back at it again with another story that'll make you laugh, cry, and then question everything you thought you knew about the world. Today, we're diving deep into the heart of Africa, to a place where the only thing hotter than the desert sun is the conflict, Sudan. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sudan? Isn't that where they have pyramids and stuff? Yeah, they've got pyramids older than your grandma's secret cookie recipe. But Sudan's also got a whole lot of trouble brewing. The kind that could make your morning coffee taste like lukewarm tap water. We're talking full-blown conflict, folks. Think gunfire and enough pollution to make even the real housewives of Atlanta blush. This ain't no joke. And it ain't just some faraway problem we can ignore. So buckle up, Buttercup, because things are about to get real. Section 2, Sudan, from one bad breakup to another. Now, to understand this whole mess, we got to rewind a bit. See, Sudan's been through a lot. It's like that friend who keeps dating the same type of person, hoping for a different outcome, but always ending up heartbroken. For decades, Sudan's stuck in a toxic relationship with itself versus the South fighting over oil and who got to control the remote. Finally, in 2011 bloodshed, they decided to call it quits. South Sudan was born, taking a big chunk of the oil with it. You'd think everyone would be happy, right? Wrong. Turns out breaking up is hard to do, especially when you still live next door and share a bathroom. Fast forward to today, and things are even messier than a teenager's bedroom after a fortnight all-nighter. The divorce left a lot of loose ends, like who gets custody of the disputed Abyei region and who gets to keep the good China. And guess what? Nobody can. So they're back at it, fighting like siblings who stole each other's toys. Section 3. This isn't just a Sudan problem, people. Now, you might be thinking, Trevor, this is all very sad and everything, but what's it got to do with me? Oh, my sweet child, everything is connected, like that time you accidentally looked at your girlfriend's Instagram post from 3 years ago. Awkward. See, Sudan's instability is like a bad case of the flu. It's contagious, and it's spreading throughout Africa fast on Twitter. We're talking about a humanitarian crisis with millions displaced, economies in shambles, and enough weapons floating around to make even Tony Montana nervous. This conflict ain't just bad for Sudan, it's bad for business, bad for peace, and bad for the entire continent. It's like that saying, when your neighbor's house is on fire, you better grab a hose. So, yeah, we all need to be paying attention to what's going down in Sudan because, trust me, the fallout is going to be global. Section 1. Back in the day, way back. Alright, so to really understand Sudan today, we gotta hop into our trusty time and travel back, well, way back. I'm talking centuries ago, back when Cleopatra was still rocking that eyeliner and folks thought the earth was flat. See, Sudan wasn't always Sudan. It was a melting pot of different kingdoms and cultures vibing in the Nile Valley like it was the original Coachella. You had Nubians, Cushites, Egyptians, all sorts of folks mixing it up, trading spices, building pyramids, the whole shebang. It was a whole different world back then. But like any good party, things eventually started to change. Islam arrived on the scene, bringing with it new ideas and beliefs. Some folks were feeling it, others not so much, and as always happens when you power, things got a little tense. Fast forward a few hundred years, and we arrive at the Ottoman Empire, rolling in like they owned the place, which, spoiler alert, they kinda did. The Ottomans conquered a big chunk of North Africa, including Sudan, and set up shop. They were all about cotton, trade, and making sure everyone knew who was boss. Section 2, British be like, let's draw some lines. Now, let's fast forward a bit more to the 19th century. The British Empire, those masters of colonization and tea time, were feeling left out of the African party, so they decided to crash it, showing up in Sudan like that friend who always brings an uninvited +1. The British, in their infinite wisdom, decided to divide and conquer. They saw Sudan as two distinct regions, the Arab-Muslim north and the predominantly Christian and animist south. And because nothing screams good governance like drawing arbitrary lines on a map, they decided to administer these regions separately. Now, you don't need a PhD in history to know that forcing people with different cultures, languages and religions to live under the same roof, or in this case border, is a recipe for disaster. It's like trying to mix oil and water, it just doesn't work. But hey, the British were busy building an empire, so who cares about a little cultural sensitivity, right? Section 3, Independence Day. Not the fun Will Smith kind. Fast forward to and Sudan gets its independence from the Brits. Everyone would be popping champagne and doing the electric slide, but remember that whole oil and water thing? Yeah, it came back to bite them in the arse. The North, with its political and economic power, basically inherited control of the newly independent Sudan, and the South, they got the short end of the stick. Again, resentment brewed in the south, leading to the first Sudanese civil war, which lasted a brutal 17 years. Think of it as the prequel to the current conflict, a tragic story of broken political maneuvering and a whole lot of bloodshed. In 1972 was signed, granting the semi. But like a bad rom-com, the happy ending was short-lived. Section 4, oil, religion, and everything nice. Not. In the 1980s, things went from bad to worse. Oil was discovered in the south, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of the pie. The north tried to exert more control, imposing Sharia law on the entire country, which went over about as well as a vegan at a BBQ festival. The south cried "Foom!" The second Sudanese lasting another devastating years. This time it wasn't just power, it was about religion and the struggle. Millions were displaced, countless lives lost, and the country was left in ruins. It was a dark chapter in Sudan's history, one that continues to cast conflict was brewing in the western region of Darfur. This one was a whole different beast, a brutal conflict between government-backed militias and rebel groups, fueled by ethnic tensions, land disputes, and a whole lot of anger. The world watched in horror as reports emerged of mass atrocities, ethnic cleansing, and widespread human rights abuses. The situation in Darfur became a global crisis, with the International Criminal Court issuing arrest warrants for Sudanese officials, including then President Omar al-Bashir, on charges of genocide and war crimes. The conflict in Darfur was a stark reminder that even as the world focused on the north-south divide, Sudan's problems were far more complex and deeply rooted. Section papers signed continues. So, after decades of fighting, South Sudan finally got its independence in 2011. The world cheered, Oprah probably threw a party, and everyone hoped for a brighter future. But remember that saying, you can take the country out of the conflict, but you can't take the conflict out of the country. Yeah, Sudan didn't get the memo. See, even though the divorce papers were signed, those lingering issues like who gets the oil fields and that disputed and were still simmering like a pot of forgotten stew on the stove. And let me tell you, that pot was about to boil over. The ink on the independence agreement was barely dry when clashes erupted along the border. Both sides accused each other of backing rebel groups, stealing oil, and generally being a pain in the neck. It was like watching a couple fight over who gets to keep the dog after a messy breakup, only with higher stakes and a lot more firepower. Section 2, South Sudan, new country, same old problems. Meanwhile, South Sudan, the new kid on the block, was trying to figure out this whole being a country thing. But it's tough to build a nation when you've got more guns than textbooks and more ethnic divisions than flavors of ice cream. Internal power struggles, corruption and continued violence plagued the young nation. It was like they inherited all the bad habits of their... Kind of like that time you caught yourself using your mom's embarrassing catchphrase, "Don't make me turn this car around." Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. The situation in Sudan became so dire that they were soon plunged in civil war in 2013, just after independence. Sophomore slump. It was a brutal conflict marked by ethnic violence, widespread displacement, and accusations of human rights abuses. Turns out, breaking up with Sudan didn't magically solve all their problems. Who knew? Section 3. Enter the generals, stage left and stage right. Now let's fast forward to the present drama unfolding in Sudan. At the heart of this latest conflict are two powerful generals who decided they'd rather be enemies than frenemies. In one corner, we have General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the army chief and de facto ruler of Sudan since the 2021 coup. Think of him as the strong, silent type, if the strong, silent type was really into military fatigues and seizing power. In the other corner, we have General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hemeti, the head of the Rapid Support Forces, a powerful paramilitary group that's basically a government-sanctioned... He's more of the charismatic, media-savvy type, if charismatic and media-savvy involved commanding a force accused of human rights abuses. The partners in crime, literally, joining forces with dictator Omar al-Bashir team. They were like these of Sudanese politics, except instead of driving off a cliff, they descends on each other. Go figure. Section 4, Power Struggle. It's like a Game of Thrones, but hotter. So what sparked this latest showdown? Well, it's all about power, baby. After the 2021 coup, Burhan and Hemeti were supposed to be sharing power, leading Sudan towards democracy like a reluctant dance partner. But their rivalry, fueled by personal ambition, different visions for the country, and probably who got the bigger office, intensified. Burhan, backed by the army, wanted to maintain the military's grip on power, while Hemeti, with his powerful RSF, pushed for a bigger role in government and a slower transition to civilian rule. It was a classic power struggle, with the Sudanese people caught in the middle like a fly in a break room microwave. On April 15, 2023, tensions finally exploded into open warfare in the capital, Khartoum, and other cities. Suddenly, the streets were transformed into battlegrounds with gunfire, explosions and fighter jets, welcome soundtrack to daily life. It was like someone hit the fast-forward button on Sudan's already messy political situation, and things spiraled out of control faster than a game of cards against humanity after. Section 5, a humanitarian crisis. This ain't no reality show, folks. The fighting has had a devastating impact on Sudan and its people. We're talking a full-blown humanitarian crisis. Thousands have been killed, hundreds of thousands displaced. Like healthcare, electricity and water are scarce in many areas. It's a desperate situation with people struggling to survive amidst the chaos and violence. The conflict has also spilled over into neighboring countries like Chad and the Central African Republic, further destabilizing the region. The international community has called for a ceasefire and dialogue, but so far those pleas have fallen on deaf ears. It's a tragedy unfolding in real time, and the world can't afford to look away. The bigger picture, because what happens in Sudan doesn't stay in Sudan. This conflict is like shining a giant spotlight on Africa's fault lines. Those cracks in the system that have been there all along, just waiting to be exploited. We're talking about weak governance, ethnic tensions, resource competition, and a whole lot of historical baggage that nobody sees to pack. Sudan's implosion is a peace and stability in Africa are fragile Jenga tower after your clumsy It shows how quickly things can unravel when you've got a bunch of underlying issues simmering beneath the surface, just waiting for the right spark to ignite them. And trust me, there's no shortage of sparks in this part of the world. One of the most immediate and heartbreaking consequences of Sudan's conflict has been the massive displacement of people. We're talking hundreds of thousands fleeing their homes, risking everything to escape the fighting and find safety. Imagine having to pack your entire life into a single suitcase, leaving behind everything you've ever known with no idea of what the future holds. That's the reality for countless Sudanese families right now. These refugees are pouring into neighboring countries like Egypt and South Sudan, putting a strain on already resources and infrastructure. It's like showing up to a potluck with an empty stomach and realizing everyone else brought just enough chips for themselves. The international community has pledged aid, but it's a drop in the bucket of overwhelming need. And let's be real, the world's track record on helping refugees isn't exactly stellar. Remember the Syrian refugee, not our finest hour. Here's the thing about instability. It's like that friend who shows up uninvited and brings all their drama with them. Sudan's conflict has the potential to destabilize the entire region, like a bad game of Jenga that tower. Think about it. You've got neighbors grappling with their own challenges, poverty, weak governance, armed groups, the whole 9 yards. Now, you throw in a massive influx, a flood of weapons spilling across borders, and the potential for conflict to spread like wildfire. Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. This conflict could embolden armed groups in the region, disrupt trade routes, and exacerbate existing tensions. It's like throwing a lit match into a fireworks factory. Things could get really ugly, really fast. And the worst part, the world might be too busy watching the latest season of Squid Game to even notice. Section 4, Economic Meltdown. So much for that investment portfolio. Now let's talk money, because nobody likes it when their wallet feels lighter. Sudan's conflict is having a devastating impact on the country's economy, which was already on life support after years of mismanagement and corruption. We're talking hyperinflation, skyrocketing food prices, and businesses shutting down faster than a Kardashian marriage. The fighting has disrupted trade, scared off investors, and sent the currency into a tailspin. It's like trying to build a house of cards in the middle of a hurricane. Everything's falling apart. And it's not just Sudan feeling the pinch. The economic fallout is rippling across the region, impacting trade, investment, and economic growth. It's a stark reminder that instability and conflict are bad for business, bad for development, and bad for everyone's bottom line. So, the next time you hear someone say, "It's just a little conflict, it's not affecting me," you tell them, "Oh, hell no, my friend. This is about to hit us all where it hurts. In our wallets." Section 5, The World's Response. A symphony of strongly worded letters. So how has the international community responded to this whole mess? Well, if you're a fan of strongly worded letters, diplomatic statements, and endless meetings that achieve very little, then you're in luck. The world has been quick to condemn the violence, express concern, and urge both sides to come to the negotiating table. But when it comes to taking concrete action, well, that's where things get a little complicated. The UN Security Council has been basically useless, paralyzed by divisions among its members, kind of like trying to get a room full of toddlers to agree on what game to play. The African Union has called for a ceasefire and dialogue, but so far those pleas have been ignored, like a substitute teacher trying to get a class of teenagers to do their homework. And don't even get me started on the lack of decisive action from regional powers, who seem more interested in protecting their own interests than in actually helping the Sudanese people. Section 6, Time to Step Up, from hashtags to action. Look, I'm just a comedian, not a diplomat or a politician. I don't have all the answers. But I do know this. The world can't afford to sit back and watch as Sudan burns. We've seen this movie before, and the ending is never pretty. It's time to move beyond the empty rhetoric and actually do something to help the Sudanese people. That means putting real pressure on all parties to the conflict to lay down their weapons and engage in meaningful dialogue. It means providing humanitarian assistance to those who need it most, without any political strings attached. And it means addressing the root causes of this conflict: poverty, inequality, and bad governance, so that history doesn't keep repeating itself. So, yeah, share hashtags, donate what you can, and that you're paying attention, because silence in the face of injustice is complicity. And trust me, nobody wants to be stands there awkwardly while everything goes up in flames. Sudanomics, a crash course in disaster. All right, folks, let's talk about money, honey, or rather the lack of it. See, Sudan's economy was already on shaky ground before the generals decided to turn the country into their own Call of Duty map. Years of corruption, mismatched sanctions had left it weaker than a new trying to stand up for the first time. Now, more into the mix, and you've got a recipe for economic even Gordon Ramsay couldn't yell his way out of. We're talking hyperinflation so bad that you need a wheelbarrow full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. We're talking businesses shutting down faster than a Tinder date after you mention your cat collection. We're talking about the kind of economic meltdown that makes you want to stuff your mattress with canned goods and ammunition. From breadbasket to breadline, when hunger becomes a weapon. Sudan used to be known as the breadbasket of Africa. I know, right? Hard to believe now. But back in the day, they had fertile land, abundant resources, and the potential to feed not just themselves, but a good chunk of the continent. Now, they're struggling to feed their own people, with millions facing food insecurity and hunger a daily reality. The conflict has disrupted farming, destroyed crops, and made it nearly impossible to get food to those who need it most. And, as always happens in these situations, unscrupulous actors are exploiting the chaos, hoarding food and jacking up prices, turning hunger into a weapon. It's a brutal tactic, using food as leverage to control populations and line their own pockets, while ordinary people are left to starve. Investment, more like I'm out vestment. Remember all that talk about Africa being the next big thing, the land of opportunity and economic growth? Well, Sudan's conflict is a stark reminder that instability and conflict are the biggest buzzkills for investors. I mean, who in their right mind is going to pour money into a country where bombs are dropping faster than Drake's new album? Foreign investment has dried up faster than a puddle in the Sahara Desert. Businesses are pulling out, projects are being put on hold, and the little economic progress that Sudan had made is being wiped out faster than your hopes and dreams after a weekend bender in Vegas. It's a vicious cycle. Conflict scares off investment. Lack of investment deepens poverty, and poverty creates fertile ground for more conflict. Section 4, the ripple Africa's economy takes a hit. Now you might be thinking, okay, Trevor, Sudan's economy is toast, but what's that got to do with the rest of Africa? Oh, my friend, remember that whole globalized world thing? Yeah, we're all connected, whether we like it or not. Sudan's conflict is sending shockwaves through the entire continent, like that time you accidentally sent that embarrassing text to the entire group chat instead of just your best friend. Trade routes are being disrupted, supply chains are in chaos, and neighboring countries are feeling the strain of hosting hundreds of thousands of refugees. It's like a game of economic dominoes, and Sudan just tipped the first one over. The longer this conflict drags on, the worse it's going to get, not just for Sudan, but for the entire region. Section 5. Opportunity lost, the high cost of conflict. But here's the real tragedy of this whole situation. It didn't have to be this way. Sudan has so much potential, so much to offer. They've got oil, gold, fertile land, and a young, vibrant population. They could be a powerhouse, a beacon of progress and prosperity. But instead, they're mired in conflict, their potential squandered, their future uncertain. It's like that friend who had all the talent but quite got their act together, always self-sabotable moment. The human cost of this conflict is immeasurable, but the economic cost is staggering too. It's a loss for Sudan, a loss for Africa, and a loss for the world. Section 6. Building a brighter future, from rubble to riches. So what's the solution? If I had a magic wand, I'd wave it and make all the guns disappear, replace them with textbooks and farming equipment. But this is the real world, folks, and there are no easy answers. Ending the conflict is just the first step. Then comes the hard part, rebuilding a shattered nation, healing deep divisions, and creating an economy that works for everyone, not just the elites. It's a daunting task, but not an impossible one. It'll take time, resources, and a whole lot of commitment from both the Sudanese people and the international community. But if they can get it right, if they can break the cycle of conflict and poverty, Sudan could finally live up to its true potential. And who knows, maybe one day they'll even reclaim that breadbasket title. A guy can dream, right? Okay, so you're probably thinking, Trevor, this all sounds pretty dire. Is there any hope for Sudan? And you know what? You're right to ask, because honestly, sometimes it feels like the only thing spreading faster than conflict in Sudan is cynicism. But hey, even a cynical comedian like myself has to cling to a sliver of hope, right? So let's talk about potential solutions, even if they sound about as likely as a Kardashian going a week without a selfie. First up, the ever-popular peace talks. Yeah, those magical gatherings where warring factions are supposed to sit down, sip some herbal tea and hash out their differences like civilized human beings. Except in the case of Sudan, it's more like trying to get a room full of hungry toddlers to share a plate of cookies. Everybody wants to listen to reason, and there's a good chance someone's going to end up with frosting in their hair. Of course, no discussion of potential solutions would be complete without a healthy dose of finger-pointing, because when it comes to international conflicts, nobody loves a good blame-double community. You've got regional powers accusing each other of fueling the conflict, each one claiming they're just trying to restore stability, protect their own interests. You've got Western nations expressing deep concern while simultaneously dragging their feet on providing meaningful aid or taking decisive action. And then you've got everyone blaming the Sudanese generals themselves, as if these two guys just woke up one morning and decided to play a real-life game of risk with their country. It's enough to make your head spin faster than a Beyoncé concert. Section 3, sanctions, ceasefires, and other Jedi mind tricks. If peace talks are as effective as a scream, what other options are there? The international community has a few more tricks, even if they feel like Jedi mind tricks on a Sith Lord. Sanctions are economic penalties to pressure warring parties, but they often hurt ordinary citizens more, like swatting a fly with a sledgehammer. Ceasefires are temporary pauses for humanitarian aid and more peace talks. But in Sudan, ceasefires are as durable as a cheap umbrella in a hurricane. They break quickly, allowing both sides to rearm before the next fight. Section 4, investing in peace, because war is so last season, okay? So maybe I'm a bit of a cynic, but even I have to admit that there are glimmers of hope amidst the darkness. While the generals play their deadly game of thrones, countless Sudanese people, both inside and in the diaspora, are working tirelessly for peace and justice. They're organizing protests, providing aid to those displaced by the fighting, and pressuring the international community to do more. They're the ones who give me hope, reminding me that even in the darkest times, the human spirit shines through. And you know what? Maybe, just maybe, the world is starting to listen. There's a growing old ways. The violence, the band-aid solutions just aren't working. There's a movement to invest in peace, to address the root causes of conflict, and empower those building a brighter future. It's a long shot, I know, but hey, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And in the case of Sudan, I'm really hoping this is one of those times. Section 1. So, what did we learn today? Besides the fact that war is bad, obviously. Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground today, traveled through time, met some interesting characters, and by interesting, I mean power-hungry generals. And maybe even learned a thing or two about Sudan and why this conflict matters. So, what's the takeaway? First and foremost, that war is never the answer. It's messy, it's brutal, and it leaves a trail of destruction in its wake that takes generations to heal. Sudan is a stark reminder of that, a cautionary tale about what happens when power trumps peace, when greed overshadows compassion, and when the world looks away. We've also learned that Sudan's story is not unique. It's a story that's been told and retold across Africa and around the world, a story of how colonialism, corruption, and inequality create the perfect breeding ground for conflict. It's a reminder that we're all interconnected, that what happens in one part of the world affects us all, whether we realize it or not. Stay woke, stay informed, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's not all bad news, I promise. Remember those amazing Sudanese activists and everyday heroes? They're the reason I haven't lost faith in humanity. They remind us there's always hope. Change is possible, but it takes all of us. Stay informed, educate yourself, and share this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more, because knowledge is power, my friend.